So we're walking back from Notre Dame. We reach the bridge between these two buildings and we think, this is amazing. I have to draw it. But the people I'm with are keen to get somewhere for dinner. So they say, we'll sit down here for 15 minutes, absolute maximum. So how much can I draw in 15 minutes? The question is really, how do I draw so that I can capture something of this scene in 15 minutes? What does this very short time frame mean for my line work, for my composition, for my choices about what I draw and what I leave out? Let me show you what my choices and technique would be if I were having to draw this scene in 15 minutes. If you'd like to have a go yourself, then this photo is on my community page, so you can go there and print off a copy. In fact, this exact scene was one of my very first location sketches when I began to do street drawings in 2018 while on a trip to Paris. At the end, I'll show you the pencil drawing I did of this very scene, although it probably took me more like an hour to draw. The next 15 minutes are in real time. There is no editing of anything out. Let me show you what I did, and then let me encourage you to have a go yourself. So let's start. And so I start. I'm using a 0.3mm pen. I finished up using 3 pens, trying to find one that had enough ink in it. But in some ways, using a pen with a lighter line, even if it's from lack of ink, is probably a better way to go with a fast gestural drawing, because it's slowing down the amount of ink that goes on the paper that sometimes can just give us a little more time to get things positioned better. So I start with this building on the left, or these buildings on the left. Sometimes it is useful to start with the closest things because we're going to want them to have more line work and to be a little more firmed up in their representation on our paper. And the fact that we're not feeling so rushed with our time just yet probably means we're going a bit slower, and therefore more ink will flow on the paper, and possibly we position the lines more accurately and we get the angles more accurate for the perspective. Whereas later on, we'll kind of be trying to whiz through it to get the last lines in, or enough lines in before our time is up. Now, it's very important with a whole lot of things at ground level that I don't just draw a straight line for the bottom of the building, because I've got a man in the street, I've got these bollards to put in place. And so I don't want a straight line that's going to just chop through everything. So I just do a bit of a dash line down there, which I can firm up if need be later on. Straight away, I have a bit of a dilemma with putting all these windows in because, well, there just really isn't time to take the usual care for the usual accuracy that I like. I really have to be suggesting these windows and approximately get the scale correct by having roughly the right number of windows in place. What I don't do is get the foreshortening accurately enough. So my windows don't narrow nearly fast enough as they move towards the right-hand side of the buildings, which creates the effect of making all these windows look closer to me than they really are. And in a sense, it shortens the length of the building instead of letting it stretch as far away from me as it really is in real life. So besides trying to do a better job of the foreshortening than I've done, the other important thing in a scene like this is to really work at getting the perspective angles correct. If the perspective angles are correct, then visually that will overcome a lot of other inaccuracies in our drawing. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I did position a few of them not steeply enough, checked it, realized it, and corrected those lines. It always makes less impact to have a correct line over a wrong line than to leave a wrong line, which will make everything look wrong when we've finished our drawing. Again, in a really quick drawing, we're looking at what are the key things that are going to convey something of the scene, of the shadows, of the structure of this building. And these shadows that are caught in the top of the window are a really important part of capturing the sense of these are windows and they're thick walls and the sun is behind. And so it is important to get those. And the other thing is the iron railings, the iron balconies, that the tops of those line up in a way that follows the perspective pattern for the whole wall. As I draw these, part of me is appalled at how inaccurate they are, but I resist the urge to try and become too exact in a way that will stop me drawing the whole scene in 15 minutes. One of the good things about loose gestural lines is they encourage the eye to roam over the entire drawing and therefore not to focus too much on trying to decide if any one part is exactly right or not. Knowing where to stop our drawing when we're doing something very quickly is an important element of the drawing as well. I've decided not to stop on the downpipe, but to draw a little bit to the left as well. As I go up, I still try and measure these perspective angles with my pen, even though it's very quickly. I rely on sight for these angles more often in this drawing than I normally do. I would normally check pretty much every angle with my pen, but at this point I'm just checking a few of them. And then I'm putting the lines in between those lines, such as these balcony rails, just by sight. And this is where I should have slipped another window in here and had 4 instead of 3 and really compressed them almost just to a line, maybe 2 lines very close together at the far end. Equally, it's important to get these very upper perspective angles correct. And again, I haven't quite got that top line that you see that I've blocked in there. Haven't quite got that at a steep enough angle. It does slope down a little bit too much, but it will do. And it's a reminder for me next time, of course, to just push that upwards a little bit more, even though it seems like I'm drawing the line straight up sometimes. And now I quickly want to fill in the rest of this building. I'm looking at the clock that I've got off camera, thinking, oh man, I've got to really hurry with this. I think I'm about halfway through my time at this point, and I'm thinking I'm really going to pick up the pace of my line work when I draw across the road. But because it does sit further back, a lighter, quicker, even more gestural line work will actually work quite well. And that's another good reason to do the closer buildings first, because the heavier line work really does work well with that. Okay, wondering what I'm going to do now. Let's get the other side of the road. And I make a real big mistake there, and in that I put that division between the ground floor and the first floor in, and I don't align it with the building that I've already drawn. And that means I've placed it way too high. Then when I go to do that street sign, the sign, and I can see the sign is going to be too tall for the scale of the pedestrian I've put already drawn next to it. And then I realize it's because I've got the lines in the wrong place. So again, rather than leave an incorrect line, I correct it and figure that the incorrect line will be less obvious than having the proportions of the ground floor and first floor wrong. And so now I've got these windows on this facade, and this facade is a little more complicated. It's got fancy stonework, it's got patterns in it. I've also got leaves that I have to reserve space for as I draw the building. So I'm trying to do that, and as I'm drawing this, I'm wondering, how am I going to capture the difference between these red stones and the lighter stones that frame the windows, and a little bit of the pattern, because it is something of the feel of this particular building and of many Parisian buildings, in fact. So I've got the same thing, emphasizing the shadows at the tops of the windows. And again, together they form a perspective angle that has to fit in with all the other perspective angles. So now I'm indicating in some quick way the rows of stonework between these windows. As you can see, I really don't make any effort to line up the horizontal lines from one side of a window to another. And then as I've been drawing them, I've been trying to work out in my head how I will represent the darker stones, the red stones. And so this is the technique of representing that pattern that I've decided to use. It works for me, but for someone who hasn't seen the original, would they be able to make sense of it? I don't know. So now we're getting towards the top, and again I particularly want to make sure that I capture the angle, the high angles of these perspective lines. And also just noting how the architecture becomes simpler. Again, that angle is a little bit too low. It should have just been up a couple of millimeters at the right hand side. And while it may not be super obvious when we look at the finished drawing, if we don't compare it with the original, that those upper perspective angles don't quite go high enough, I always feel that they really introduce a lot of the visual drama of a scene. And therefore, if we reduce the angles, we reduce the visual drama. And, well, I figure the more drama in my drawings, the better. So now I'm trying to work out some of these lower level details. And there's some shop fronts happening here. Again, I really only want to suggest them. I don't want to get bogged down. I can't afford to get bogged down in hatching or cross hatching. I just don't have time to do lots of lines, and certainly not to do them accurately. So I'm not doing that so much. But I do want the arches roughly to fit in and for the scale to be correct. Scale is really important even when we draw quickly. So there's this awning to put in. An awning's great because it's fairly quick to draw and it's a nice identifiable feature, and it gives us a way of hiding some of the detail that we otherwise would have to draw. And there are some people sitting in front of this cafe, I presume it is, under this awning. Here's an umbrella, street umbrella I'll put in. I can still picture all this from when I sat there. That's the wonderful advantage of drawing on location. We really take in the whole scene. So I placed the tree trunks for the two trees that we're going to have in view so that I can try and make sure I connect the foliage with them. Now, I'm not going to have much opportunity to do much with the leaves, except suggest their outlines and try and give a sense of the scale of the tree by suggesting the size of leaves. Now, I draw these chimneys in because their silhouettes, I think, are really important. Those long, tall chimneys with the little chimney pots on top are a real feature of Paris architecture, so we do want to pay attention to those. So I've mapped in the bare outline of the trees. And I'm aware that I don't have very many minutes left, so I'm trying to work out how much can I do with what's left. What haven't I done? Where are the bare patches of the scene? So draw something of the buildings behind. I want to suggest the protective rails that are around these trees. I've got to admit, I know they're there and I have a vague sense of what they look like, but I didn't actually feel like I had time to look at my reference carefully when I drew them. I really just drew in kind of more how I thought I remembered what the protective railing around the tree trunks were. So adding some people and a bit of shading inside the arches just to create a little bit of tonal contrast, and because there aren't too many lines needed to fill those in. Now I usually do a lot of hatching in my trees to indicate shape and tone and shadow, and I really don't have time now, so I'm going to have to mostly go on the fact that there's no detail within the tree canopy so much to help me define it. So here I am now on those railings. And then the only other thing I think I really want to do is suggest something in the last 30 seconds of the paving of the roadway, because otherwise it's this very bare patch right in front of me. But I literally only have 30 seconds to be able to put some gestural representation of the paving, the cobblestones. And so that's really not very much. And I want to make sure that I do get a sense of the foreshortening, that there are closer ones and then there are further away ones. So I just very quickly do this. I'm looking at the clock. I can see I really only have seconds, and this pretty much is it. But I'm feeling quite happy at this point. I feel like I've captured enough overall, that there's a few highlights, there's a few details, that generally it's accurate enough to carry an overall look. And I hope I've captured something of the beauty and the character of this particular location in Paris. Place Dauphine is one of my favourite parts of Paris. It's just a beautiful spot to be in, especially late on a summer's day. And as I mentioned earlier, here's the pencil sketch that I did sitting in the Place Dauphine in July 2018. I just counted how many were in the book before it, and this was my 6th drawing. And unfortunately, I did it on the back of another one by not checking my book properly. I've never made that mistake again. And here's a photo of my drawing on location. What a magic way to spend an hour on a summer's evening in Paris. So whatever your usual drawing style, let me encourage you to develop a really fast gestural one where you really let yourself go and just try and capture not the entirety of the scene, not the accuracy of the scene, but something of the feel of the spot. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. When I drew this, I never dreamt I'd be finishing up doing this. We never know where our drawing's going to take us. But the important thing is, wherever it's taking us, whatever journey we're on with it, that we have fun. All the best. I'll see you next time. Bye.